So chapter 23 homework, let's take a look here. So first aorist middle and active and middle indicative parsing. Not all of the, well, I don't know. I have to go back and take a look, but maybe all of these are aorist, active and middle in the first aorist. We'll see. Number 3 confused you? Okay, let's take a look at number 3 here. Say this with me, everybody. Edzetesa. So, looking at the form itself, is there anything that could be an identifiable sort of prefix or personal ending or tense formative that you can imagine? Okay, good. The augment certainly is something that can help us out here, right? So maybe that augment is being added to the stem here. That leaves us with zeta. So zete. Anything else look familiar? Sigma epsilon. Okay, is that a tense formative, sigma epsilon? This is a modified tense formative. For which person? Third singular. So normally sa becomes se in the third singular of which tense? Yes, aorist or first aorist. If we just say aorist, I assume you mean first aorist. And is this active or a middle passive kind of ending? It's active. And then indicative. What is my lexical form here? Okay, is it zao? It's zeteo. Zeteo. So it does have a zeta, and then if you know your vocab words, you know that after a zate, you have an eo ending among your lexical form verbs. How does knowing zeteo help you to make sense of this part of the form right here, that eta? This is a contract verb, zeteo. Zete becomes zete before tense formatives, right? All contract vowels that come at the end of contract verb stems lengthen. What are the lengthenings that happen? Alpha and epsilon will lengthen to eta. Omicron will lengthen to what? Omega, okay? So zeta becomes zete. And then I add my sigma, alpha, and whatever other forms go there. All right, what does zeteo mean? To seek. So who's doing it? Third singular? He, she, it. And how am I going to translate aorist verbs? Yeah, simple past. So sought. Sought. That is not a slur against anyone, calling someone a sot. You sought. No, just kidding. All right, so he sought, she sought, it sought. Okay, does that help? Make sense? Okay, other parsings? Right. Okay. But that's a good question. So let's think about that for a minute. What if you were inclined to think that this were really a future, and how would I make sense of this form? If you look here, if you know this is zeteo and it's a future, do futures have augments? No. Only past time verbs get augmented. So that would be, that sigma may make you think future, but you've got to reckon with the augment now. And that augment says, hey, 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 look at me. I'm not future, I'm past. And then you think, okay, well then what is my past tense formation that has sigmas in them? And it would be the sigma alpha, but we just always have to remember that there's one place where the sigma alpha becomes sigma epsilon.
This may be like a dumb question, but how would you know, though, that maybe the epsilon is not part of the stem? Like part of just the word, aside from the personal ending. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, it is theoretically possible to have a verb where you have a sigma as part of the verb stem.
Oh, no, I'm talking about the epsilon at the beginning.
Oh, here. Mm-hmm. Here, yes. That is also theoretically possible. That is. And then you're going to have to ask yourself, okay, if I assume that this epsilon is actually part of the verb stem, then I have to go through my vocab list and say, okay, do I have any verbs whose lexical form is edzate something or another? And we don't have any verbs like that. Okay, but if we chop that epsilon off, we do know we have a zeta kind of verb, right? This is why knowing your vocab words is really important. That doesn't help you when you're reading Greek New Testament texts that you've never read before. You're going to meet verbs you've never met. But you have to be able to start reasoning your way through this to say, okay, let's assume the epsilon is part of the stem. Then I'm going to look at my lexicon and say, do I have a verb, edze something, that I can find? And you won't. And then you'll go, okay, well, let's assume it's not part of the stem. Then I'm going to look up zeta and try to find that verb in the lexicon. And sure enough, you will. You see. Other questions? Yes?
So number 6, escomen.
Mm-hmm.
It was second aorist, but I think the Mounce key said it was first aorist.
On the Mounce key, it just says aorist.
Everything just says aorist.
Yeah, it doesn't.
It does, okay.
So is number 6 second aorist?
It is technically a second aorist.
Okay. Because there's no tense formative. Right?
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you remember second aorists are missing something the first aorist has.
Yeah.
Right? Second aorists are missing a tense formative. First aorist has it. That's one of the characteristics of second formations compared to first formations. Okay? Anytime you have a second of anything, whether it's second aorist, second perfect, it will always be lacking something that the first has. Okay? And we'll see that in a few other places.
Just making sure I wasn't going crazy.
No, I mean, you are, but not for that reason. That's right. Yes. You've arrived.
Just to clarify, like something on number 7, I got it right, but it took me a little bit to recognize it first. The epsilon augment is actually there with the eta.
Yes. Right here in the middle. Mm-hmm. Yes. Your lexical form is pros euchamai. Okay. So the pros part is your prefix, and this is a compound verb. And that's why the augment has gone after the prefix, but before the stem. Okay, good. Any other part of that cause you trouble? Yes, that's a second aorist. How do you know it's a second aorist and not, say, an imperfect?
On number 7?
Number 5.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the stem. It's gen and not what? Gen. Gen is the present stem, and that would have been what I would see for the imperfect. That's
What
right.
distinction were you making? How would you know it's not a what?
So this is a second aorist, okay? And I was asking, how do you know it's the second aorist and not the imperfect? And the difference between the second aorist and the imperfect is only a difference of stem.
Maybe this is a silly question, but is there a difference in translation between second and first aorist?
No, they're both simple past. The only difference between first and second aorist is simply how you form that past tense. Just like in English, we have regular forms of forming our past tense and irregular ways of forming, but there's no difference in the tense value of it. Okay, so I broke versus I smoked, right? Smoked is the normal past. Broke versus compared to break is the irregular past, but they both are just past in the way we conceive of it, right?
I think I had trouble with 10. We might have gotten into it in class on Wednesday. That was not simple.
Yeah, we can take a look at that one real quick if you want to. What do you think the lexical form is?
I wasn't sure.
Any guesses? Okay. Yeah, if you look at the eta here, this is potentially What vowels can lengthen to an eta for the augment? Yes, we have alpha or epsilon possibilities here, don't we? So if this is an alpha, it's R, and then what we have here with the C is a velar, possibly, plus a sigma, and then the alpha. So it's going to be alpha or epsilon, R or air, and then we need to think through our velar consonants, which are what? There's 3 in our square of stops. What are they? Kappa, gamma, chi. Right? So, do we have any verbs that have arc, arg, or arg, or arch? We have archami, right? So that's one possibility, archami. Okay, do we have any other possibilities here? Well, don't we have an erch possibility? Okay, so erchami. That's another verb, completely different verb, right? Okay, so those are the 2 verbs that should come to your mind as you're just working on the front end of this and looking at the tense formative. The metha, what person and number is that? That's first person plural. And is it middle or passive, or middle passive or active? Middle passive. Yeah, that's our middle passive, right? So we're looking at a middle / passive form and indicative. So here's the question. Assuming that it is archami and it has a sigma alpha, would that be a first or a second aorist? It'd be a first aorist. Okay. And we could see archami doing that. If it's archami and the epsilon has lengthened to an eta and the chi has interacted with the sigma alpha to get that, then we would have to say that archami's aorist is a first aorist as well, wouldn't we? Now, does archami have a first aorist form? No. If you learn your principal parts, the aorist of archami is a second aorist and not a first aorist, is it? What's the aorist of archami? Elthon. Remember Elthon? So that's our aorist, and so it's a second aorist. So even though just strictly looking at the way the consonants are interacting with each other, archami is a possibility, but if you know your principal parts, you know archami doesn't use a first aorist at all. All right. So archami is going to be, in fact, our lexical form. So that's what we're going to use here. Good question. What's the, how does Mounce give us, I can't remember how he lists the lexical form here. So he does give us archami. Yeah. Right. So archami with that middle form has what sense? To begin. And when it doesn't use the middle passive ending, and he says it's only going to occur twice with just the active form, what's the sense there? Rule. Okay? Rule. So think archangel, the ruling angel. I'm sort of surprised by that because his lexical form in the book has the my ending. So that's what I would put there. Okay. Now, last thing is how we're going to translate this puppy. How do we do that? Erixamatha. Subject is we. And what? Began. Okay, excellent. Now, this is a first aorist middle. It's not a first aorist passive. One thing that we're going to learn as we get into the next chapters, we talk about aorist passives, that aorist actives and middles use the same stem. Aorist passives use the aorist passive stem. And they use a different tense formative for the aorist passive also. And we're going to learn that soon enough. Okay? So does that help, Connor? Yes. All right, good. Any other questions? Yes, so I'm putting middle here, but if you're going to use Mounce's term for deponent, then you could put deponent there in parentheses, or middle / deponent. The point being that this form has the middle endings, even though it's translated as if it were an active form. So you don't want to try to make that passive in any sort of way in terms of the meaning here. Okay. Anything else on parsing? If not, let's take a look at the warm-up questions. Anybody want to walk through any of these?
On delta, I had a question. How do we know that it's third person plural instead of first person singular? Because the forms look the same for first person singular and third person plural when it's the secondary active. Right?
Yeah, so you're looking at delta?
Yeah.
All right, and it's exabalon?
I was looking at a
A Keiruxan. All right. Yeah, so the xi here represents some consonant that's a velar plus a sigma, and the alpha here is the sigma alpha, right? You see that? You've got your augment over here and your sigma alpha. So clearly first aorist, as you've noticed. What is the nu doing here? Is that a movable nu or a personal ending nu? That's personal ending nu. And in the first aorist, what does the final nu as a personal ending indicate? It's only third plural. It's not first singular in the first aorist. The first singular has no ending. Remember that? So we have to go with the third plural here. Now with your imperfects and second aorists, you can't tell the difference between the first singular and the third plural because they both really do use the nu at the end. So there, I've got potential ambiguity. Once I read the sentence, though, that ambiguity is probably going to be obscured here because I've got a third person plural form to begin with. So it's they preached and they cast out, and my daimonia pala is neuter plural. And it actually could be accusative or nominative. So I suppose technically this could be the subject, but the many demons wouldn't be casting anything out, would they? They would more likely be the direct object. And the subject, they, is going to be the same subject as the preachers. So they preached and they cast out many demons. So I would go with a direct object and an accusative analysis for that. So anyhow, no real formal ambiguity on this first form. It can only be third person plural. Okay.
And Mounce here, he translates it as they were casting out. Is that acceptable? Like, what would you say in regards to that?
Yes. We have an aorist form here. Over here, this is actually an imperfect, not an aorist. How do I know that? Only the stem. I've got the ball with 2 lambdas. The aorist is the second aorist that has 1 lambda. Okay? So the writer is fully capable of choosing the aorist for both and chose to use the imperfect in the second one, and probably to indicate what was going on at the time. So uses the aorist for perfective aspect, giving a simple sort of summary snapshot of what they did. They preached, and perhaps while they were preaching, what were they doing? They were casting out many demons, along with that. All right, other questions? Oh, on delta. Oh, the ellipsis is just indicating that there's material missing in between these two.
Okay.
Probably a prepositional phrase or something else, and he just wants to give you a really, really short sentence or phrase to practice with.
Well, because on the key, on delta, he left out that, but on zeta, he actually kept the ellipses in the translation. So I didn't know if there was a reason for that.
Yeah, no, sometimes I guess he just accidentally leaves things in or takes them out in the answer key.
Pause there.
Yeah, no, this just indicates that there's actually real text in the Greek New Testament missing in his exercise.
Okay.
Okay, other questions?
Zeta,
Zeta.
it says, but he, where did he get the word he from?
Ah, good question. Where did the word he come from? Yeah. When you have hade and then no subject, and you go straight to the verb like this, this is an expression where the article is doing duty for the pronoun. And you're actually going to see this in the Greek language a bit. Did we look at this one? This sounds familiar. Or maybe it was somewhere else. I can't remember. But he op akrinata, what's that? Answered. And then nothing. He answered nothing. Or nuttin'. Is this a first or a second aorist? It's actually a first aorist. Where's the sigma? Yeah, that's right. It fell out because I've got a liquid consonant before the sigma alpha. Apokrynsata is what I should have had. And the liquid says no way, Jose. Okay. Other questions? Did you miss that?
No, I was being dumb. So when we got translations, I was gonna ask about number 3, but on it's a compound, and I couldn't find the augment because I didn't think it was a compound. It's the same word we just used there. It's a similar word.
Oh, okay.
I figured out why.
Now you know why. All right, good.
Now I found the augment.
Excellent. All right. Other warm-up questions? Let me have you look at alpha here. We'll just look at a couple of the verbs. We have episteuson. What's the epsilon here doing? That's the augment. So when I see the augment, I need to be thinking what? Past time. And which two tenses are past time? Aorist and imperfect. Very good. Next thing I'm going to look for then are tense formatives to see if I can tell. Do I see a tense formative here? Yes, the sa ending here. And then, in addition to the tense formative, I have a nu. So, which person and number is that? Third. That's right. Third plural. So, why is it plural? Because poloi, which is my subject, is plural, isn't it? Okay, so many epistusond. What does that mean? Believed. So this is what? Imperfect or aorist? Aorist. Very good. And then the next one we have egropsen. Egropsen's my verb. What is my lexical form for egropsen? Grapho. And take a look here at egropsen. This epsilon is the augment. And that means I'm looking for imperfect or aorist features. And I don't see a sigma alpha. I don't see an alpha, and I don't even see a sigma. So this must be an imperfect, right? Right? No. What happened to my sigma alpha? Okay, yeah. That's right, the stop and the sigma. So the phi and the sigma produce the psi. The epsilon should have been an alpha, but when what number and person does the alpha change to an epsilon? That's third singular. All right. So how am I going to translate this? It isn't indeed an aorist. He wrote. He wrote. Good. He wrote y'all. Okay. Over here I have ekolison. Ekolison. There's that same sigma epsilon. This nu, is that the personal ending? No. Das ist die movable. Movable nu. That's right. Okay. So what person and number is this? Third singular. And it's what tense? Aorist. First aorist. Is it active or middle passive? Active. That's right. And indicative, of course. And do I have an epsilon augment that matches aorist? Ja. Jawohl. How am I going to translate this? What's the lexical form? Kaleo. What's kaleo mean? I call. I invite. I summon. Ekolison? He called. He called. Anybody know what euthus means? Immediately. Immediately. Good. All right. And then at last, let's look at epsilon. We have ageren. Ageren. That looks kind of funny. That almost looks like a second aorist or an imperfect, doesn't it? I don't see any sigmas, no alphas. What am I dealing with here? Yes. Liquid issues? Is this a liquid verb?
Yes, because of the row.
Yeah, that's right. What is my lexical form here? Agero. What does agero mean? To raise up. To raise up. To raise something up. Okay. So look at the eta. Compare that to the epsilon here. What does that tell you? It's augmented, which means it must be a past time form. What are my two possibilities? Aorist or imperfect. Okay, good. Now, take a look at what I've got here. I have presumably an epsilon plus ger. My stem here in the present active indicative, which is my lexical form, is eger. So I can just go ahead and say this is an imperfect, can't I? What's that? No? Can't just assume that? Could it be imperfect?
Because if it's lengthened, then that means it has an augment.
Right. So,
It couldn't be perfect.
well, but the imperfect uses the present stem, but it always has to augment.
But wouldn't it have to be an omicron to connecting vowel? If it were imperfect?
Well, but what if I had a third singular ending? Wouldn't I use an epsilon?
Yeah.
And then probably a movable nu? Okay. Well, here's the question. If this is an aorist, is it a second aorist? It couldn't be, because otherwise it would be identical to the imperfect, which uses the present stem. And second aorists stems are always different from present stems, so that you can tell the difference between a second aorist and an imperfect. Okay? So what's happening here, this is a little bit tricky, is the aorist stem is actually a ger, which is what the real root is. It's not a ger with the iota, but it's a ger. Okay? So what's happened here? I take the aorist stem, and to make it first aorist, I've got to augment it, so the epsilon's going to become eta. Then I'm going to have ger. And then what kind of a letter is rho? It's a liquid. So I want to add sigma alpha, but what's going to happen here? Sigma's going to fall out. What is going to occur to the epsilon to make up for the loss of the sigma? It will compensatorily lengthen and become a diphthong, which is, in this case, epsilon iota. And then, even though the sigma's gone, the alpha of sigma alpha is here. And in the third singular, it becomes epsilon. So I get a gere. Okay? And that's going to look identical to the imperfect now, but for completely different reasons. It's not because they had the same stem. The imperfect is using ager, which already has the iota as part of the stem. The aorist is using ager with an epsilon for its stem, but it became this due to the loss of the sigma because of the liquid. All right? So their forms end up looking very similar to each other. That one can. Now, it's only here that we have this problem, okay? What would the imperfect active indicative first singular be of agero? It would be lengthened epsilon, present stem, and then omicron nu, ageron. I was lifting. What would the aorist active indicative first singular be? It would be agera, with the alpha, which represents the sigma alpha. Okay? So these are first singular forms. This one's the imperfect. This one's the first liquid aorist. Okay? See the difference? So it's only on that third singular form that I really have any true ambiguity. All right. This is the sort of stuff that just makes you want to float away on bubbles in your bubble bath. Any other questions here about the warm-ups? Are you warmed up yet? Are you hot with excitement? Let's do the translations. Just to encourage you, you guys are doing what there are millions of Christians across the world who wish they could do and will never have access to do it in a setting like this. So be happy. Rejoice.
That can either inspire like gratefulness or like sadness. Like, what's your goal here?
Yes, gratefulness. That's right. Okay.
Spurring us on to desire to do it.
Yes, you go and bring this to other people. Okay, so questions on the translation homework for Mounce chapter 23. Which ones you want to talk through? Number 1. All right. Let's read this together, shall we? You ready? Episteusa dia elalesa kai hemes pisteuamen dia kai lalumen. All right, so what we have here are actually a series of short sentences. Short sentences. So, episteusa, is that a present tense verb? Nope. How do you know? Augment and sigma alpha. No ending used, so which person is it? First singular. So how do we translate that? I believed, dia, therefore, elalesa, same forms, therefore I laid. What's that? I spoke. What's the lexical form? Laleo. Laleo. So we can see the augment dropped in here. What happened to the contract vowel, the epsilon? It has lengthened before tense formatives, which is what contract verbs do. All right. So I believe, therefore I spoke. Kai he mes pistuamen. What's that? I believe?
Like on the
For the second part?
No, it says that we are believing.
And so I was really confused about that, why it would say that, because he makes is a plural.
It is. It is. So he has and I here?
No.
He doesn't. It's on the first part. The beginning of number 1 should say I believed. Yes? Okay. All right. So this is we. We believe. Now, does the answer key say we are believing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hate that.
Why?
Because.
Isn't it?
No, it's present. But just because it's present doesn't mean you have to use a progressive present form in English. Especially if your verb is a verb of state, mental state, emotional state. Like you wouldn't say, I am being happy right now. You would just say, I am happy, right? And you wouldn't say, I'm believing right now. You just say, I believe. I believe. So I think it's perfectly good and well to translate this as simply, we believe, therefore, la lumen. Now what I want to mention real quickly is the kais here. So we normally translate kai as and. But here, the kai is not really joining two like things, Jack and Jill, Barney and Andy. It's rather functioning in a adverbial way. And I would want to translate this as also. We also believe, therefore, we also speak. Okay? All right. Other questions?
I had a question about number 2.
Mm-hmm.
Because with humas, you translate it as you. Should that be? I translate it as them. Would it be? Is that wrong?
Yeah, so humas is to be contrasted with hey mas, humas and hey mas. So if you can remember this, the difference between these is the difference between first plural and second plural. Okay, so third plural is autos. Autos. The thing I tell students to remember is that if you see a you in the form, like at the beginning, then it's you. Okay, you plural. So humas is in fact you all. Autus would have been the form if it were them. Okay?
Why are we translate when we put you all, even though like whatever Mounce says, if he doesn't put he just puts you.
Yeah, you's fine. If you do make it explicit that the you is plural in English, that's okay. I don't mind that at all. Can we look at the forms of number 2 here just real quickly at ebaptisa and compare that with baptise? Both of them have sigmas at the end of the stem there. What tense is ebaptisa? I have one vote for aorist. Anybody else think it's aorist? You second that vote? Okay. Are you second aoristing it or just? Okay. So this is first aorist. We know that because of the sigma alpha. Look at baptise. I have a sigma. What tense is that? So we have future. Is there anything else about this that tells you it's not the aorist? Yeah, there's a lack of an augment right here. So we wouldn't want to take it as a past time verb, would we? So how would you translate ebaptisa? I baptized, past. Autos baptise? He will baptize. Terrific. All right. You see that. Any other questions on homework?
So when it comes to, like, I noticed in these translations, a lot of the times when he is he always does like, we are believing, finding, so like what, I know there's like not as huge a distinction between like we are believing and I believe, or like we are finding and we find. So why does he choose to do that? Or like what, should we like adhere to one or the other? Or is it?
No. I mean, well, I guess you have to adhere to something, right? So just do whatever is in my head and you will be perfectly fine. No, I'm just kidding. Mounce is trying to drive home the idea that the present stem is used for what's called continuous aspect. That's his term. And therefore he has a propensity to translate all present and imperfect forms using the progressive ing kind of translation value. I just think it's a stretch, and that's why I dislike it, because in so many circumstances it ends up creating very awkward and funny sounding English. Because in English, when your verb is a verb that indicates a state of being, an emotional state, a mental state, adding the ing just sounds really silly. You know?
So kind of we're looking for what makes sense while still staying in the tense.
Right. And with present tense, you could use just the simple present or the progressive present. Those are both acceptable ways of rendering a Greek present.
I have a question about number 8.
Mm-hmm.
Mounce translated tauta as these things. I translated it as this. Why is it plural if isn't tauta singular?
Good question. Let's look at the end of tauta here. Do you see that alpha? Okay. When you see a final alpha, there's really two things that need to be going through your mind. You could see this as feminine singular and nominative, right? But it could also be nominative and accusative plural for neuter nouns. I put my case first. I don't know why I did that. But over here, you've got to ask yourself, okay, so I've got this alpha here. What is the feminine singular nominative form of this? It's haute, okay? And so for these sorts of pronouns, I recommend that you memorize, commit to memory, all, oops, I've got the wrong breathing mark here. All three of the forms of the nominative, hutas, haute, and then tuta, okay? And what you're going to have to remember is that the these forms are different. They're different genders, and eventually they're all going to get tavs or towels at the beginning of the word, right? So hutas becomes tutu, tuto, right? Haute becomes, yeah, tautes, taute. Tuta already has the tau. It becomes tutu, tuto. All right. So what I am looking at here is not the feminine form, but rather the neuter form, and it's going to be nominative or accusative plural here. Okay. In this particular sentence, since the verb is first singular, Egrop says, I wrote. I'm not going to take this as nominative, but rather the direct object accusative. So I wrote tauta, these neuter plural things. Okay? So I wrote these things to you. Anybody else have a question about this one or anything else if you want to move on?
Question about number 6.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's
So
look.
I got, and he went and he began to preach in the Decapolis how much Jesus did for him. How come there's not anything between Decapolis and how much?
How come there's not anything between the Decapolis and how much?
Yeah, like how come there's not like a transition there, like about how much or something along those lines? I
Yeah. Well, he began to preach in the Decapolis. The object of the preaching is this word here. How much or how many things he did for him. So I don't know. Like, I can say, for example, if you can say he preached about something, or you can say he preached something, right? He preached the grace of God, or he preached about the grace of God. I think this is really just an issue of how you've translated it. In Greek, it would still be the same sort of structure with an accusative as the thing that you preach. He preached how much or how many things God did for him.
Well, you can't do how many things without tuta, I thought.
Well, what is this form? Yeah, this is hasas, which is how much or how many. And it's in the accusative neuter plural. So basically, hasas is functioning like a relative pronoun, okay, but with the added constraint of quantity. So I could simply say, just with a relative pronoun, he preached what Jesus did for me, or him, and I could use hasas and say he preached how much Jesus did for him. And so this word is gonna be used in exactly the same way that a relative pronoun can be used. All right. Other questions? You have just a few seconds. Get them in. You have a quiz coming.
The quiz on Monday.
I think I'll do it Sunday. See how committed you are. No, it will be Monday. All right. We all done? Great.